Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. I'm Boris Tizengauzen. Today is September 29th, and this episode will be packed, lots of news, and some of it is good. In this episode, the Kremlin's stunning defeat in Moldova, what will happen to the unrecognized Transnistria and the Russian troops stationed there. In Washington, they're discussing supplying Tomahawks to Kiev, while Russia no longer wants negotiations and is making some very strange comments about the Tomahawk issue. Ukraine can now cause blackouts in major Russian cities, and last night Neptune missiles reached a very important factory in Russia. And finally, Greta and Thunberg have sparked a major scandal. What exactly did the members of this expedition fall out over? We'll talk about it in today's episode. If this is your first time on this channel, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. So, another serious defeat for the Kremlin. Moldova has stayed on its European course. And, as reported by the Electoral Commission this morning, after counting 99.5% of the votes, Maia Sandu's party received 50.03% of the votes. The Patriotic Bloc, which is the pro-Russian political entity led by the former president Igor Dodon, garnered approximately 24.3% of the total vote. Consequently, in terms of parliamentary mandates, the clear majority is now firmly with Maia Sandu's political party. Let me remind you that Moscow did everything it could to take control of the Moldovan parliament in these elections. They spread fake news, claimed that Moldovan troops would be sent to Ukraine, handed out leaflets in churches, and widely involved priests in anti-Western propaganda. In short, they attacked the electoral infrastructure and planted bombs. Polling stations, cyber attacks, basically all of this happened. They spent huge amounts of money on bribery and brought people out into the streets. And on election day, by the way, they switched to a new tactic at overseas polling stations. There were phone calls claiming that the polling station was mine. That's how they tried to disrupt the voting, because they knew that the diaspora usually chooses the European path and Maia Sandu. In short, there were attempts at organized protests to destabilize the situation, but the Moldovan police quickly put a stop to them. Several suspects were detained, some of whom are from the unrecognized Transnistria, and on the eve of the elections, the pro-Russian opposition, as well as people in Moscow, were saying that if Maia Sandu manages to retain full power, then in the near future, Kiev and Chisinau, with Europe's approval, could decide to eliminate the unrecognized Transnistrian Moldovan Republic by military means. In general, this will absolutely have to be done if Moldova doesn't want to be shaken by Russian influence, and if it doesn't want Russia, through this unrecognized Transnistria, to periodically sabotage Moldova's path toward the European Union. In short, Russia will definitely start stirring up the situation if the issue with Transnistria isn't resolved. And Ukraine doesn't need this pro-Russian enclave on our border either. And let me remind you that there are still Russian troops in Transnistria. According to the latest estimates, there are between 2,000 and 2,500 servicemen. There used to be more, but now that's the number. They guard warehouses with weapons and ammunition. Well, this is a colossal defeat for the Kremlin. I won't hide it, it's simply a blow. By the way, even the most optimistic experts didn't expect results like these. This is a very good result. And now if we look at the bigger picture, things are really bleak for Russia overall. That is, Russia is pouring enormous resources into trying to influence the elections in Moldova. Failure. Before this, there was a failure in Romania. They also poured enormous resources there, and yes, the same thing happened. Armenia and Azerbaijan have also waved goodbye. The Central Asian countries have long since come under the umbrella and protection of China. And then there's the loss of control over Syria, the flight of Ayadi. All of these are the great geopolitical achievements of this 1.5-meter strategist just in the last few years. What's left? The Georgian government is pro-Russian and there are hugs with Lukashenko. Oh, and yes, I almost forgot, Finland and Sweden joined NATO. I mean, how could you steer things in such a way to end up with this result? It really takes skill to outplay everyone like this. You look at all of this and think, whose agent is Putin after all? An American agent or a Chinese one? He's killed 1 million of his own Russians in this war, and now he's going to bring in guest workers from Bangladesh. What a wonderful picture. Meanwhile, in the US, there's a pretty significant shift in rhetoric happening. After Donald Trump called Russia a paper tiger and said that Putin isn't capturing any territory at all, but is actually losing it, this rhetoric was picked up by his supporters as well. Vance's team stated that Russia has refused any negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. According to J.D. Vance, after the summit in Alaska, Russia rejected both bilateral talks with Ukraine and trilateral contacts involving the US. I quote, "The Russians are killing a lot of people, losing many of their own, and have nothing to show for it. We are committed to peace, but it takes two to tango. As we have seen in recent weeks, Russia refuses to participate in any bilateral or trilateral meetings involving Trump or other US officials. That's why we've been actively pursuing peace since the start of the administration, but the Russians need to wake up and accept reality." And well, you can feel it, right? There are two important points here. And Rubio, by the way, said pretty much the same thing, and Keith Kellogg made some interesting remarks, which we'll get to a bit later. Remember, I mentioned that after this speech, when Zelensky met with Trump, Trump called him a paper tiger. We need to watch what happens next. Who else will carry these same messages, and whether this will continue or just remain a one-time statement. This rhetoric is being passed on to the entire Trump team. Now, it's important to understand whether this rhetoric will be transformed into concrete actions. That is, if they start to be put into action, then it means a real transition from words to deeds indeed. Well, then another question arises. If Vance openly says that the Russians refuse to negotiate, then where are the sanctions? Well, maybe the sanctions will be in a slightly different format. That is, not the way we expect sanctions against those who buy Russian oil and gas. The US leadership is discussing the possibility of supplying Tomahawk missiles to NATO, so that later NATO can transfer them to Kyiv. The final decision will be up to Trump. Vance mentioned this, and so did Keith Kellogg. So now, as they say, Trump has excellent cards in his hand to knock on the bold dome. He has sanctions. Just impose them, sign, and let's go. And he has the possible transfer of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. The main question is, what deadlines has he set for himself in his mind, and when does he actually plan to use these cards, or does he plan to use them at all? Because if it comes to that, there's another option that Donald Trump himself mentioned. I'll get up from the table and walk away. That's it. This isn't our war for now. And that's also possible. And today I came across another interview with Keith Kellogg, General Kellogg, but still, after these words, a glimmer of hope appeared. First of all, he confirmed that Trump is not against Ukraine carrying out long-range strikes on Russia, if they have the means to do so. And he was asked, you say this is the president's position, to allow Ukraine to carry out long-range strikes on Russia. What was that? Was that sanctioned by President Trump? And Kellogg replies, I think if you read what he said and what Vice President Vance and Secretary of State Rubio said, then the answer is yes. So in fact, Keith Kellogg said that Trump sanctioned long-range strikes on Russia. And he also said that the decision on Tomahawks has not been made yet. It's in Trump's hands. So Russia has actually responded, by the way. I thought everything would happen right there and then. We declare war on the USA? But no, look at what the mustachioed Barfosetka Peskov says. If it turns out that the US supplies Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles, nothing will change on the front lines. Peskov stated this. According to him, there is no panacea that can change the situation now. And here is the quote. We have indeed heard these statements, we are carefully analyzing them, and of course our military specialists are closely monitoring them. The question will be this. Who can launch these missiles? Will it be the Ukrainians or the American military doing this? And who will it be? Who will be providing the targeting? In other words, the very fact of the transfer is not the problem. The problem is who is programming these missiles, or how. Not very aggressive, you have to admit. So where is the statement, just you try it, this will be World War III? Where is all of that? Well, I think for that they'll now unleash Medvedev, the ethyl berserker. But Peskov is right that Tomahawks on the front lines might not change the situation. But if just one of them hits a certain bold target, the situation could change dramatically. The entire civilized world would breathe a sigh of relief then. Calm down. And let me remind you, friends, that we have an important fundraiser right now for the legendary 3rd Assault Brigade.
Greetings, friends. My call sign is Talbot. I am the commander of the revenge crew of the 3rd Separate Assault Brigade, FPV Strike Company. I'm reaching out to the viewers of Boris Tizengauzen's channel with a request to help raise funds for Matrice 30 daytime drones.
These are large copters. We need them for reconnaissance, and they also perform some other very interesting functions. The fundraising amount is significant, 1,100,000 hryvnias. We are counting on your support, on your help. Thanks to them, we will be able to destroy the enemy even more effectively and bring Ukraine's victory closer.
Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes.
Let's help our warriors. Believe me, drones in the hands of the aces from the 3rd Assault Brigade are... It's a guaranteed way to send the occupiers after Keosayan right there to that very concert, by the way. Speaking of which, regarding the new sanctions from the Hungarians, today I read the news that the Predators of the Heights unit destroyed an enemy helicopter with an FPV drone, and with an FPV drone that costs $500, they destroyed a Mi-8 attack helicopter worth over $10 million. Well, that's incredible. I actually took this quote from the unit's page for this very reason. This result became possible thanks to the coordinated efforts of the intelligence, the headquarters, and the pilots, and most importantly, thanks to the people who support us. Every contribution, every bit of help, every kind word makes such victories a reality. It's just an unbelievable result. Yesterday, another important event happened. There was a temporary blackout in Belgorod. Russia thought that only it could strike at Ukraine's energy sector, trying to scare us with the lack of heat and light in winter. But this time, something hit Belgorod, and both the city and the region lost power. And whatever it was that hit turned out to be extremely effective. Locals report that the Belgorod CHP and the Luch electrical substation were hit. Unknown missiles struck. And this is what it looked like.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
So there's still a big question as to where a blackout will happen faster. Judging by the comments I've read in local Belgorod chats, the Deep Russians were quite puzzled. And here's how this blackout started. But that's not all. The Russian electro-detail plant, which is located in the Bryansk region, was hit at night by Neptune missiles. It's important to understand that the distance is 240 kilometers. Well, in general, a perfect hit. One more link in the enemy's military-industrial supply chain is gone. At that plant, they produced various connectors for printed circuit boards, for military equipment, airplanes, antennas, base stations, and so on. And yesterday, by the way, they were burying Keosayan. We already mentioned him. Even Putin sent a wreath for him. And I think surely at that funeral, the concentration of scum of all calibers will be off the charts. And I wasn't wrong. They were all there. All the most zealous fans of kissing up to Putin, they were all there. Kirkorov, Dolina, Aklobistian, he even showed up in a military jacket. Petrosyan, Mashkov, Ernst, the head of the National Guard, Zolotov, Zakharova, Solovyov, and of course Steven Seagal. He already looks like some sort of cartoon character with that dyed hair and beard. He wears these baggy robes, probably so no one notices how well he's been eating off Russian money. And then there was this loser, I can't even remember his name, who sings about Sarmatushki missiles watching over the United Statesky. But you know what? They were interviewing people there, and you could see that no one was really that upset, except for that actress who doesn't have an Oscar, Simonian. She was rolling her eyes, sobbing. Well, that's just how it turned out, yeah. So they were interviewing people, and I think, what kind of scumbag do you have to be in life for people to say about you? No matter who they asked about Keosayan, they'd say, he was special, he was unique, he was unpredictable, which translated from... In diplomatic language, that means he was a total jerk while he was alive. But we already know that, don't we? As they say, may the deceased have good health, all the best, and not get bored down there in hell. Not all of Putin's propagandists will survive this war, that's a fact. And now they're trying to turn Dolina into a new prima donna. Naturally, it's not working and it never will. But I noticed, just to fill the gap a little, with Alla Pugacheva having left, now they're trying to bring Dolina to her senses or something. I've noticed that the KGB FSB style methods of dealing with these figures haven't changed at all. There are those who are obviously ready to kneel before Putin themselves, but for those who aren't so eager, they use blackmail, like in Dolina's case. They caught her in a textbook way, scammers tricked her out of her money. It's all unclear, a murky story. Maybe she was planning to move money out of the country or something else. Anyway, the scammers swindled her. And then the security forces gave her that money back. And right after that, she started taking a very active part in all those military fundraisers for the occupiers and so on. So the others, all those Kirkorovs and the rest, they were also hooked with those naked parties and so on. Then they even apologized afterwards. And like little bunnies, they rushed off to the war to perform in front of their boys. So basically, they were caught by the gills after that naked party. Some were even caught before that. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if the FSB themselves organized that naked party just to get everyone hooked. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and your hair will become soft and silky. Many people write about it in the comments. That's exactly how it is. So go ahead and subscribe. And a little bit of annoying calmness probably won't hurt you either, I think. The dramatic storyline continues with eco-activist Greta Thunberg's swim. She's swimming to Gaza, just to remind you. As you know, she has an entire flotilla, over 40 boats, and she's even being escorted by frigates. In short, Israel has promised to put the eco-activist in a prison for terrorists if she makes it there. For eco-terrorists, probably. But there was a terrible scandal within the team that sails on the boats. I couldn't pass it by because it's so cool. Listen here. In Greta Thunberg's flotilla, Islamists clashed with a queer activist. Now I will explain who is from the Mesozoa. So, on board this pro-Palestinian flotilla, there were Islamists, Hamas supporters, and as it turned out, also queer activists. This is simply incompatible, and a conflict broke out. And on this boat, look, pay attention, there was the self-proclaimed communist queer militant Saif Ayadi from Tunisia. When this became known, there was tremendous discontent. Oh, right, for those who are from the Mesozoic era, and who aren't really familiar with modern terminology, queer is a collective term used to refer to a person whose orientation and gender identity differ from the majority. I just read that to you from Wikipedia because I'm from the Mesozoic era too, from the time when a hand in a plastic bag in a horror movie could play a killer jellyfish, and everyone believed it. That's the era I'm from. So this queer, a communist militant, he's got communism and he's queer too. Because of this, Ayadi, one of the coordinators of the Khaled Bujima group, announced his departure, and he explained that an agenda alien to the Palestinian cause was being promoted. And he was deceived about the identity of the other participants. Others followed his lead and also stated that they don't play those kinds of games. There were even words about some kind of desecration. Listen, does this communist queer militant know what would have happened to him under communism? And I'm just curious. Naturally, this turned out to be a serious blow for the group. They had always insisted on unity, that they were all in this together. It turned out that Hamas terrorists are far removed from their queer values. And related to this, Greta Thunberg was removed. More precisely, she was kicked out of the executive committee that coordinates the flotilla. Her photos are no longer on the website. Greta's representatives stated that she will remain on board as an ordinary volunteer participant. Greta, you're an eco-activist. Focus on your cause. Or even better, since you've already set sail there with queer communists, radical jihadists, and fervent Islamists, since you're going there, you have many Hamas supporters on board. Make a very strong and urgent appeal for the innocent hostages to be immediately released in Gaza. Now that would be something, right? And then you'll definitely hear a lot of new things directed at you from those Hamas supporters, and you'll understand who you're really dealing with. Well, I think she already understands everything anyway. Another piece of news. Lukashenko suddenly became seriously concerned that Poland announced it would shoot down planes or other targets that are moving and violating Polish airspace. And he said that if Poland thinks it will just shoot things down like that, no, it won't happen. Lukashenko says the response will come instantly. Look at what he came up with. He says, for example, I'm flying to Białowieżska Puszcza. That's right on the border with Poland. So what, are they going to shoot down the president's helicopter or some military escort helicopter? But the response will come instantly. And do you know why Lukashenko got so nervous? Because 2 Belarusian helicopters have already flown into Poland, violating its airspace. And back then, it was right before the elections, the opposition actively used this weakness and the fact that nothing was done about it. Like, Belarusian helicopters just fly here as if it's their own home. Now it seems like they're planning to shoot them down, but so far it's just words. Let's see what happens in practice. And Lukashenko emphasized that we don't need this, Belarus doesn't need it. As for their statement that they'll shoot them down, well, let them try, let them shoot one down, or let them try to shoot down something Russian over Kaliningrad. Well, then we'll have to, this is Lukashenko speaking, God forbid of course, but as they say in Russia, fight with everything we've got. Who are you trying to scare, mustachioed chips, with your talk about fighting with everything you've got? Well, just so that Lukashenko doesn't get too clever, it would be possible to send as many drones back as flew from Belarus to Poland. Naturally, without a warhead. That would be a perfect mirror response, send the same number, and have them land just as neatly near the Moser oil refinery. A little greeting, right now they're without warheads, but a bit later, well, who knows? If something else flies in from your territory again, it won't end well. I think that would be the right thing to do. That's the only kind of method they understand. I'm almost certain that some of the drones came precisely from Belarusian territory. All these stories are being spread like Lukashenko supposedly shot something down there, or that he helped Poland with the Gerans. It's all a cheap trick to deflect suspicion from themselves. In reality, he and Putin are acting together. Everyone knows that. But Lukashenko is still trying to keep that little window to the west slightly open. He wants to have his cake and eat it too, without falling out with the faded Kremlin macho. But Poland has an excellent and effective tool. They can close the border. Recently there was quite a commotion about it. It was closed for a short time during the Zapad 2025 exercises, which by the way went by almost unnoticed. Putin didn't even come to Belarus. He took off somewhere deeper into Russia. In short, representatives from China, they were basically flying back and forth to Belarus and Poland as if it were their job, asking for the border to be opened. And besides, Poland, together with Lithuania, could block the Kaliningrad region. So there are mechanisms, there definitely are. And also, according to rumors, Lukashenko ran into serious trouble when China found out he was using Chinese transit trains for smuggling. I mean, it's no secret to anyone who in Belarus is protecting smuggling at the state level, the same clan that covers everything else. So what do they actually do? They stuffed cigarettes and other contraband goods into transit trains and containers, Chinese ones, that were passing through Belarus. And when Poland started finding this contraband in Chinese containers, a whole bunch of facts came to light, like, yeah, we find it almost every 3 days. I think the Chinese were really upset when they found out how that sly guy was using their transit trains. Well, friends, take care of yourselves. Take care of your loved ones and subscribe to this channel. Let's support our warriors from the legendary 3rd Assault Brigade. The link to donate is in the description. There you'll find private, mono, and PayPal for those who want to help from abroad. Well, if you don't see the payment details, maybe you're on a different channel. Here's the QR code. Wishing us all a peaceful day and glory to Ukraine.